And good morning. How is everyone doing? Awesome to be live with y'all on this fine Tuesday morning, a special Tuesday morning for me. I will kind of let people know in a couple weeks why this is such a fine Tuesday morning, but grateful to be here. Awesome. Really appreciate everyone checking in. Week 7, UFL week 7, or excuse me, coming up, week 6, another solid week. Personally, I went 3-1, almost went 4-0. If it wasn't for the San Antonio Brahmas, kind of left me out in the dark a little bit. But in the end, the biggest thing for me is that extremely grateful to have football to watch, right? Last year we were extremely spoiled in the sense of we had the USFL for 10 weeks, we had the XFL for 10 weeks. We essentially had nonstop football in 2023, and now it's dimmed down a little bit. But the CFL coming back, they'll be coming back strong. I'm excited for that. There's an outside chance maybe we go to the Grey Cup and everything like that. But if you're new here, my name is Pat Ruffino. I've been covering the spring football since about 2021. Technically a little bit longer than that. Been really big into these quarterback rankings and everything like that. So if you're new here, drop a like, subscribe, all that goofy stuff. But overall, we're seeing some haves and have-nots right now in quarterback play and just the league in general, right? We have bunch of young talented guys. We're seeing some roster movement. We're seeing some surprise cuts, honestly, too. Like I talked about this recently. It looked like a beginning of the changing of the guard, for lack of a better term. Like we're starting to see, some of these older guys kind of get phased out, like Channing Stribling, even JoJo Tillery, Isaiah Henney getting released and whatnot. Taylor Russolino, as especially now in the 2024 class, as they kind of find their footing in, okay, do I go to rookie mini camp? And I talked to Coach Martin about this yesterday of the Memphis Showboats. Him and I had a pretty good talk. There was only one of us on the stream, so it was kind of an impromptu Zoom, for lack of a better term. But as we continue to kind of progress throughout the UFL season about like how everything is going on, to me, I feel like we're at a pretty high quality of football right now. And I'm extremely grateful for that as someone who covers the league, as someone who talks to players, as someone who's just generally in love with this game. I'm extremely excited to keep covering it, despite being out and about throughout the United States with my family. But in the end, extremely grateful. So, pushing on to what I always talk about, right? We always got these quarterback rankings. We'll talk a little bit about the games. Reed Johnson's going to do a much better recap towards the end. That guy has been grinding as well. So big shout out to Reed and the Marcast there. But let's talk about these quarterback rankings. We saw 10 quarterbacks take snaps this week. From a couple of we saw, Jarek Guarantano back on the active roster. We see, Adrian Martinez, him coming into his own. It's just, for me, it's kind of a gluttony of riches right now. And we're extremely grateful, in my opinion, to begin this process to continue to talk about quarterbacks, to continue to see what they got going on and whatnot. And it doesn't get much better than this for a guy like me, right? So without further ado, let's get into the quarterback rankings. Number 10. He's kind of, I don't want to say a bottom feeder at this point, but he's someone that's going to be on the back end due to volume. This is a guy, Lindsey Scott, that we see all the time, come in, get a little bit cute, little cute. He's not really getting the maximum reps. We want to see him for his true success. We want to see him at that D'Eriq King volume, right? What does that mean? I mean, D'Eriq King threw for 4 touchdowns last year. I think he ran for 5. You probably saw about 15 snaps from him overall last year, like as far as the amount of volume he had and everything like that. So Lindsey Scott, to me, with a less mobile Luis Perez, I mean, I don't think he's going to save Arlington or anything like that because Perez has been playing effective. He's, leading the league in passing yards. You saw a couple bad drops, man. And like this guy, Perez, he does lack the arm strength. He is a little bit like not as mobile as you would like and everything like that. But in the end, like Luis Perez has been extremely effective. He's been extremely, a field general back there as he's been for years. Like unfortunately he's 0-6. His high watermark for touchdowns honestly isn't that high. It isn't that high. I mean, he'll probably throw over his career touchdown. But we talk about this in nauseum a little bit. It's like, what if you're the Arlington team, if you're even Memphis? I talked to Coach Martin about this. It's like, are you looking to 2025? Like, how unsafe are these guys' jobs? Do you really want to develop your next wave? Are you going to be bringing in guys, like your Nkosi Perry's, like your Emory Jones, guys who are in training camp now that are probably not going to get signed and whatnot for the long term of 2024 or 2025 in the NFL. So to me, it's like, what are we doing here as far as like what is our long term? But Scott comes in, he doesn't throw a pass. He goes 3 rushing attempts for 10 yards. That's kind of his MO at this point. That's kind of his stat line. And if that's what they're comfortable with and that's what they want to rock with, like I guess that's kind of how it is. You got to wonder. Arlington Lane and I, we talked about this on Twitter the other day. Was do you trade Perez? Like, and he brought up Michigan and San Antonio, and and we'll talk about it more when we get down to Perez. But it's like, Danny Etling's very mobile. You got Bryce Perkins, very mobile in Michigan. EJ Perry, extremely mobile. Perez doesn't rock that mobility. He doesn't have the arm strength like Case Cookus does, which is where the offensive coordinator Marcel Bellefeu came through, and I just don't see anyone really biting on it, in my opinion. Do you want to put him in an air raid in San Antonio? I mean, Quinn Dorney's put up some good games. He's had 2 back-to-back bad ones, but they've been in it. And in my opinion, that's just you're kind of in a rock in a hard place. And Gemini, good point. Gemini brings up a good point. They aren't desperate enough yet because I don't know if that pressure is on Stoops. I don't know what their MO is as far as like, do they care enough? I'm gonna be honest. I've heard that Bob is done after this year, 3rd year with Arlington, and I'm looking it up right now. Scott has only thrown 5 passes this year in non 2-point conversion attempts. He's ran the ball 15 times for 54 yards. If you give me 1 second, I'll pull up De'Aaron King and his his volume and whatnot. It's completely different. Like it was, I would willing to bet, yeah, King threw 25 passes in 10 games. He had 4 touchdowns and 1 pick. That was kind of what I thought we'd be getting from Scott. He had 30 rushing attempts or 101 yards. So as far as volume wise, Scott isn't probably going to get those numbers in the role because King didn't have like a week 10 start despite Arlington. Arlington was DC was clinching a playoff. Got a little tongue-tied there. And, Gemini says Bob and Wade are probably gone because of the pay cut. I mean, they could be. I don't personally think that, it's a money thing. I think, they're both older guys. I think Wade comes back. It's unfortunate. I think Wade comes back. I think, he goes to San Antonio because he wanted to be there. I don't think AJ Smith is ready to be the head coach there. Payne Pardee would probably be the OC. You give him a taste of being a coordinator, but, foosball fan brings up a good point. I think Arlington's D is not really that effective. And you saw that, Jalen Redmond, who I had on my midseason all UFL team, that was a guy that, kind of burst onto the scene. Tomasi Loy, not playing as well as he did last year. Vic Beasley, kind of a shell of himself. He's getting older and whatnot. But, we'll talk about that a little bit more when the games come up as well. I don't know what this flea flicker was at the end of the game. And something I was surprised is Dormady hit his hand on the helmet of one of the players. So I, for a second, thought that he was actually out for what that's worth. But we'll see what happens on that. But yeah, Lindsey Scott coming in at 9. Coming in at number 9 is San Antonio Brahmas quarterback Quinn Dormady. Man, major regression. 16 of 26, 79 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 pick. Looked pretty mobile, 3 rushing attempts, 30 yards. I mean, he's got the keys to the Ferrari on this one. You got Kirkland, Stevenson, John Lovett, really coming into his own, kind of going his way up the leaderboards as far as running backs. Cody Latimer, tight end, extremely serviceable. Alze Mack as your backup tight end, never a bad situation there. But in the end, a little anemic. And, I think Foosball fan is right. We are on Kevin Hogan watch, unfortunately. Hogan's a guy, extremely mobile. Arm strength, I think, is limited. Has NFL experience, has played, on multiple teams in the NFL, has been there. For Dormady, him getting older and whatnot, this is kind of the last hurrah for him, I think, as well, as far as does he go from being either a spring football star to possibly getting like a Ben DiNucci type contract where he's going to be on the practice squad or something like that, to is he possibly going into a more Brandon Silvers type role where he's going to be more chilling, just on the roster, collecting paycheck, maybe figuring out what the next move is like. But, with that stat line, that's a lot of pass attempts, man. And that's not really you see what Silvers did last year. You see what Garbers was doing. You see what Dormady has done in this offense, and to go throw under 100 for 100 yards in an AJ Smith offense, and you're throwing the ball 26 times. Granted, they went extremely run heavy. That's just unacceptable in my opinion. And I'm a little bit disheartened. Obviously, they're still in the playoff race. I do think they're a better team than DC. I just think sometimes, for lack of a better term, things happen and the ball doesn't bounce your way. Ask Arlington that. And they didn't take advantage of the opportunities they could have. And that's a loss. He put up 153 yards on the ground, almost 200 yards rushing. You feel pretty good about that. But, at this time, it just doesn't seem like that is the reality right now. And, everyone wants Dormady to succeed. Everyone wants all these quarterbacks to succeed. I don't think there's any doubt about that. But at the same time, the proof is in the pudding. And, Wade, I feel that there's a sour taste in that coaching staff's mouth. And I wouldn't be surprised if Kevin Hogan got the nod. They signed Christian DeLora, QB out of Arizona, who's got a little bit of a checkered past, was a no-go for many NFL teams, even CFL teams. And I don't know if he gives you that spark that you need, especially this late in the off season. I personally don't think Chase Garbers comes back. I think he's probably advised that it's not the best move for him. So I think you're going to have to figure it out with Dormady, and then possibly, do you go to Kevin Hogan? Coming in at number 8, Troy Williams of the Memphis Showboat. He goes 6 of 13, 65 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 pick, 2 rushing attempts, 11 rushing yards. We'll talk about it with Cookus as well, but, you got 2 quality quarterbacks back there, and they just look overwhelmed because of the pressure from the offensive line. It's sad. That's really the best way to describe it. It's extremely sad due to the fact that we're not seeing the efficiency that we know both these quarterbacks can play with. Case Cook is one of the best quarterbacks in spring football over the last 3 years, and right now it's just not clicking. And I think it's a majority of the offensive line. They're putting a lot of stock on Darius Victor, who, as much as we all love and whatnot, is just not the guy that he was 3 years ago. And you can tell that Cookus is banged up. You can tell that Troy Williams will be banged up at some point. It's extremely unfortunate, but at the same time, both these guys are not going to reach their potential due to the fact that they are under duress constantly, and they have the skilled players. They have, Jonathan Adams and David Davis and Sage Surratt, and even D. Anderson has made a lot of improvements in practice. 34-yard touchdown last week, and unfortunately, we're not seeing the results of this Memphis team that a lot of people had as a contender to get to the playoffs. And as they go into week 7, they're 1-5. So we'll see what happens on that. Overall, though, from a selfish side of this, really excited that each week, Troy Williams gets an opportunity. He's one of those guys that got real hurt as far as when this league cut from 16 teams to 8 teams, because he's a guy who's definitely a starter, and he could be a QB that you see like in top 6 in the league if there's a 16-team league. But unfortunately, you're not going to get that. Moving into number 7, Reed Sinnett, 19 of 34, 135 yards, no touchdowns, no picks. I'm still big on Sinnett. You could tell this guy knows football. I just think there's so many problems internally that these guys are, no matter who they are, like who's playing quarterback. You want to go Jared Guarantano. The guy had such happy feet, and maybe that was, the lack of experience, but Guarantano is not going to be it. Team recently released Kenji Bahar, who was their QB3 for a while. They bump out Nolan Henderson down to QB3. I think they're effective when they're able to run RPOs with Henderson. I mean, Sinnett's not athletic enough to run that. He's definitely your stand in the pocket type passer and whatnot. But, I see Sinnett, and I think this is a guy who isn't playing that bad. Like, there was a couple bad drops and whatnot that he had. I just think this team overall is not where they need to be, which is really sad. I thought they were going to be a little bit better than what they are now, maybe 2 or 3 wins at this point in the season. I thought the USFL conference outside of Birmingham was going to be a lot closer, a lot more cannibalization as far as, stealing wins from each other. But overall, it's honestly extremely sad to see a guy like Reed Sinnett, not really live up to the potential. And unfortunately, foosball fan brings up a good point. Houston is outcoached. It's clearly evident that right now they are extremely outcoached. There's so much, I don't want to say friction, but it just looks internally so damaging, in my opinion. Like right now, like you're seeing so many like blunders and this and that, and it just doesn't look like they understand what is going on, unfortunately. And while big fan of so many of those guys on that team, it to me, I don't feel any sort of enthusiasm, for lack of a better term, when I watch these guys play. And it's sad because it's, there are some players on that team. I know Mark Thompson is trying to be his own Antonio Brown, but he's a talented player. TJ Pledger, talented player. That offensive line, I do like what they did. They went to a six-man offensive line like Max Pro on a lot of their passing plays and whatnot. And they started doing a little bit more GY stuff, which is when the guard and the tight end pull. But unfortunately, there's just so many problems. Like Natai Rogers constantly getting beat. His footwork is not up to par. The Avery Genesee, when he's in there, just looks lost. And, Kramer, he's slow off the snap. And, there's a lot of yelling. There's a lot of infighting. It seems like that. You release Isaiah Henney. They got this new guy. I think his name is Roberson or Derrickson or whatever. Justin Hall is their only threat right now, which is sad because you've had some good guys on that team. And, they're not utilizing the tight ends like they did last year. Like, they lost Josh Peterson. I believe he had 25 or 32 receptions last year. And they completely have abandoned the tight end between, Clint Sig and Woody Braden and, Brandon Bowman. Granted, Woody got hurt, but they're not, filling that need for production. And that was such a big part of their game last year. And unfortunately, we're not really seeing them utilize and maximizing a lot of these play action passes, which is something that, Bahar did pretty okay with and that they could utilize. Coming in at number 6, I'm going Case Cookus. It's unfortunate, 15 of 23, 115, 1 touchdown, 1 rushing attempt, 4 rushing yards. I'm going to echo a lot of what I say about Troy Williams, the case cookies. Like, you complete 15 passes for 115 yards. That's showing me a lot of short game, a lot of dink and dunk, a lot of just getting the ball out there. And like I said, this is a guy, Case Cookies, who has stretched the field. This is a guy who's way more athletic than I think people give him credit for. The guy ran for over 100 yards in 2022, a 79-yard, rushing touchdown. Was a former wide receiver at one point, way more athletic than we give the guy credit for. I really would like to see just solid offensive line play. I mean, Jaron Jones is being put on his back. It doesn't matter who else they got out there. Like, Jordan McRae's playing a little bit more. The guy is, a little beat down at this point. McRae is an alt football staple. Unfortunately, it just doesn't look like he's got much left in the tank, which is extremely sad because this is a guy, I've been watching since the AAF and everything like that. So it's overall just like Houston, extremely sad. And while I do like seeing a more competitive Michigan team, because, I think Mike Nolan's a good football coach and everything like that, it's just incredibly disheartening to see these players who, and, I'll post this when we go into Coach Martin's interview, that these guys are really giving it their all because, the end game is to get to the NFL, to get the NFL paychecks and whatnot. And unfortunately, we are not seeing, like, as fans and media and everyone in between, we're not really seeing the ROI as far as, like, solid play from this Memphis team that I think everyone thought would be a playoff team. They're extremely effective and whatnot. Coming in at number 5, going back to his, spot he's been in a lot this year, it's Luis Perez. I mean, Perez, consistent spring football figure. Unfortunately, they're 0-6. The Arlington defense is not giving people their money's worth. And it's extremely sad because, he goes 24 of 37, 180 yards. Like, this guy is going to eclipse 7,000 yards, possibly 50 touchdowns this year. This is a gentleman who's been, if there's a spring football league, Luis Perez is there. And he's won in a lot of places. He turned around New York Guardians. He led the Generals to a playoff berth at 9-1. He led the Jousters in the spring league to the Mega Bowl. He was extremely effective on the Birmingham Iron. He also obviously won the championship last year and had a great playoff run for them. I think he threw 6 touchdowns in the playoffs. So to me, I'm watching this and you're just kind of like, is it his fault? Is the tide turning? I believe he's like 28 years old. It just, to me, it comes down. It's like, what's the end game here of not only the Arlington Renegades, but spring football in general? So are we going to see kind of like in the NFL where guys get more of a shot? We don't really see that outside of like maybe our week 10 game. And, there's always like constant like churn with like quarterback play and everything like that. But oh my God, like, I'm not really sure. And, foosball fan, we talked about a little bit earlier, Perez to the Generals or the Brahmas. Is that really the move? I don't think it is. And, and while it sounds great on paper, it's like, is he going to be able to push the ball down the field? Like, are we giving up on Quinton Dormandy? I don't think we do that. Coming in at number 4, wasn't his best performance. He goes 14 of 22, 179, 4 rushing attempts, -7 rushing yards, and 1 touchdown. It goes Jordan Ta'amu, and this is another guy who's been around since the XFL 2020. But and I talk about this every week, and I feel like a broken record. But with Ta'amu, like, you're down all these injuries. You're down Abram Smith. The offensive line play. They get a new coach in here. Sean Kugler was with the Cardinals. He's also the head coach. I think he was at UTEP for a while as well. But another guy that, is really willing his team to victories. And they get a big one against San Antonio, which I did not see them having. But, it's a lot of willpower. And the biggest thing about Ta'amu is because of his athletic ability, he's able to avoid sacks. He's able to move around in the pocket. And he takes that gets an incompletion, throws the ball away, whatever you want to call it, and you go from a 2nd and 10 to you go from a 2nd and 10 to a 2nd and 18 to a 2nd and 10, and that's something that I don't think enough people talk about and whatnot. Does DC have enough to get to the playoffs? I have no idea. It's a great win for DC, no doubt about that. They willed their way to the playoffs, but do they do enough to get to the playoffs? I have no idea. I wouldn't be surprised. I do think they're going to be completely overmatched. Obviously, as a second seed, if they have to go back to St. Louis, or if they have to go to St. Louis, I could see a 40,000 plus crowd for a Battlehawks playoff game. Especially against DC, get some DC fans there. It could really up those numbers and whatnot. The Cardinals do not look good, so I could see St. Louis. St. Louis really, drawing a good crowd and whatnot. So that's kind of where I lie on it. I mean, Teamu, Perez, these guys are fixtures in this league. You're starting to get some other guys. Once you get, in my opinion, to that 4th or 5th year of these leagues of playing around and whatnot, that's when I kind of call you a fixture. Some people talked about some of these Jared Fernandez retiring, a spring football legend. I mean, the dude played 2 years. You got a guy like Perez, 6 seasons. I even go like Channing Stribling, 6-7 seasons. Jamar Summers, 6-7 seasons. Like that to me is extremely fruitful, and these guys being called legends in their own right, for lack of a better term. Coming in at number 3, I am loving this one. It's Danny Etling. Etling goes, 16 of 28, 202, 1 touchdown, 7 rushing attempts, 55 rushing yards. I mean, this dude is extremely athletic, and he's, I talked about Etling a lot as far as finally getting the opportunity to really go out there and really, prove that he belongs as a spring football player, and not only in spring football, but the NFL as well. And when you get a guy like Etling to finally come out there and finally put together, a solid campaign, like this guy's playing his way back into the NFL. And, I personally thought you get a guy like EJ Perry do the same thing. And, we are seeing it tenfold over here. We are seeing Etling take advantage of the opportunities that he's been given, and I think he can play his way back into an NFL camp. He's go into Seattle, maybe go back to one of these teams he's been with. It's extremely exciting to see a guy like Etling, essentially take off now that he's been able to kind of push forward and put together a solid stat line. I mean, the guy is athletic as the Dickens, for lack of a better term. He's been able to do so much good stuff, in this league, getting comfortable, once he actually took the reins as QB1, and, they're not really like pitter-pattering around as far as, for lack of a better term, these 2 QB systems. Now we see a guy who's able to get comfortable, who's able to do, air quote, all the right things, and he's taking advantage of it. He's putting together some good stat lines. I mean, someone you guys got to watch out for, in my opinion. COC Mariner, number 14 on that team. We haven't really seen Trey Quinn kind of pop in any of these games. We've seen Marcus Sims. Now they're starting to kind of, if you can notice, they're starting to kind of put a little bit of a, what's the word I'm looking for? They're putting, extra attention to him, kind of playing over the top of him because of how explosive he's been and everything like that. But now Etling, you're able to take advantage of the opportunities. You're able to see what he's got going on. And it's just been extremely rewarding. Sims, number 2 in the league. Cole Hicatini is still there and whatnot. It's everything's kind of clicking. Trey Quinn, only 18 receptions so far through 6 games. Maybe he pops or something like that. But Mariner's a guy who's been pretty decent, and he was a mid-season signing and whatnot. He's got 11 receptions for 136 yards, so he's averaging like 13 yards a pop on a reception. It's extremely nice to see, and I'm be, for lack of a better term, I'm extremely grateful to see it. And, Edling was a guy I championed for in like 2021. I was like, man, this guy go to USFL, put together an Alex Magoo type season. Granted, Alex Magoo wasn't Alex Magoo in 2021. He was just another guy. Now he's a wide receiver. And to me, that could have made a lot of, I think that would have made the league a lot more, fun to watch, the USFL in 2022. But overall, Etling has his weapons. That offensive line looks a lot better. Ryan Nelson has drastically improved from 2023 to 2024. Ryan Pope doesn't look that bad. You got also Noah Johnson improving, especially last year they had Sean Pollard on that offensive line. It was absolutely abysmal, but this team's a lot stronger. Curious to see there was an injury to Ginda. Curious to see the injury report this week, but you have Deshaun White is a guy who was with the Bills for a little bit last year. He was the draft pick from that Oklahoma. That's a guy that I think could really pop. You got some good, defensive backs. Lawante Taylor played a pretty good game last year. Very bend but don't break, but also very aggressive in several pass breakups. You got Kai Nakua, who in my opinion could be the defensive player of the year. I'm very curious. I mean, that to me is one of the, lack of a better term, that to me might be one of the more encouraging, matchups as far as who did they pick for the defensive player of the year. Breland Speaks, he's very poppy, if that makes sense, but he's still in there causing havoc and then allowing these other defensive linemen to really come into their own. And this team chemistry looks pretty good as well. So I'm extremely pumped what Etling's doing. We'll talk about them more in the game matchups, but overall, solid week of play from Etling, getting our number 3 ranking. Coming in at number 2, AJ McCarron. Another solid game. 24 of 37, 255, 3 touchdowns, 1 pick, 5 rushing attempts for 4 rushing yards. I mean, McCarron, in my opinion, I think he could win the MVP or Offensive Player of the Year because he's had more volume than Martinez. And for no surprise, Martinez is coming in at number 1. But as we continue to progress into the season, it just seems like his added mobility that he had. This is a guy coming off an ACL tear. In 2021, didn't play in 22 and whatnot. And now we're seeing kind of just another year in the system, getting all the reps, leading the league in touchdown passes by about 5. He's second in the league in passing yards. He's, trailing Perez by about 20 something. Looking at McCarron possibly throwing about 2,300 yards, which would be more than he did last year. I mean, if he's due for a 4 or 5 touchdown game, it wouldn't surprise me. But overall, the weapons, it only gets better. It's Hakeem Butler's on a torrid pace right now. So I'm putting McCarron at 20 at number 2. I don't think there's much to really argue with and whatnot. And while he is over 30. I mean, we're looking at a gap in football, for lack of a better term, because he really wasn't actually playing and taking the reps and whatnot. His last start was with the Texans in 2019, I believe. It was a Week 17 game and whatnot. So you're seeing a guy who's still relatively young in the football space, but continues to progress and get more comfortable. And he's another coach on the field. You can tell outside Sinnett, I think he is. Obviously one of the smartest quarterbacks in that league. Coming in at number 1, no surprise here, it's Adrian Martinez. 23 of 36, 368, 4 touchdowns, no picks, 5 rushing attempts, 25 rushing yards. I mean, what you could say about McCarron added to obviously more athletic ability is what you can say about Martinez. It just, in my opinion, they found their guy. They're going to ride with him. I'm glad, and this is no disrespect to Matt Corral, that they're going to continue to let this gentleman grind and play and go through the hard times, which there's usually a lack of them, honestly, for a team like Birmingham. But, it's so plug and play. It doesn't matter. No matter who you have, it continues to just be a great experience for the Birmingham Stallions. I mean, you go from, Magoo to Jamar, back to Magoo, like, and you just win. They're just winning. The running game is solid. Ricky Person's got 6 rushing touchdowns. The overall cog of everything going on. It's just such an efficient. The offensive line is great, and they're rotating offensive linemen in there. The Stallions team is unmatched. That's why they're 6-0. I will say they're probably going to play their hardest game of the franchise since it came back in 2022 in Week 7. But I'm extremely curious to see what's going on as far as how that works out. But Martinez, he's the guy. Ride with him for as long as you can. If you beat you've already clinched the playoff spot. If you beat St. Louis, I think you keep Martinez on the sideline. I'd love to see Jamar Smith start a Week 10. I think that'd be great. The problem is with the money and everything. You're messing with guys' paychecks and whatnot. Martinez, I think he's proving himself back into an NFL camp. I don't think there's many people that can deny that. So we'll see what happens with that. But overall, extremely happy to see a guy like this. I'll eat my words. I did not think that Martinez would be this good, and I think very little people did. If you did think he was going to be QB1, you probably were just like not a big Matt Corral guy. I thought they should have went with Jamar. Those first couple weeks, both those guys look extremely timid, but I think it speaks volumes to Skip Holtz and what he's been able to do. So those are the quarterback rankings. If you're on YouTube, let me know, who's too high, who's too low. If you're on Twitter, there's over 400 people watching. One, appreciate that immensely. Two, if you want to get over to YouTube and subscribe, the 400 people watching, I don't know how many are on YouTube, but we're going to get into but I'm extremely grateful for all y'all and whatnot. We're going to get on to our week 7, predictions and whatnot. I went 3-1 last week. I think I'm 14-10 on the season right now. So, not a bad shtick going for me. So let's get into these week 7 rankings and whatnot, or excuse me, these week 7 predictions. First game of the week, Memphis versus Arlington. XFL, USFL conference. They're both 5-5. I don't know, man. I'd like to hear everyone else's opinions on this. I personally think it's going to be Arlington. I think they're due. I think they're, if Jalen Redmond's healthy, he's a one-man wrecking crew on the interior of that defensive line. I personally see Arlington being able to kind of push this out and whatnot. I gotta go with Arlington. I think Perez is, going to have more time. I think, the weapons are better because their offensive line is better. And it's an offensive line that doesn't have Garrett McGinn, who's an all USFL guy, championship player, NFL experience. Not having McGinn on the offensive line, in my opinion, has hurt Arlington, especially at the defense as well. Where's Donald Payne at, man? This is a guy that everyone, loved and everything. Maybe he's getting a little bit older, So we'll see what happens. I think Arlington wins. I don't see Memphis being able to compete in the front 7, and Arlington to me is going to win probably about 24-18. That would be my thing. I'm writing it down. This is the game of the week, man. This is our championship precursor and whatnot. You got the Battlehawks versus the Stallions. I wonder if the coaching staffs are going to show all the tricks. I wonder how bad St. Louis wants to win this game. I wonder how bad Birmingham wants to win this game. Because I think they're starting to realize that they're probably going to play each other in the championship game. So you throw out all the tricks. Do you do the fake punt? Do you do this? Do you do that? That's the curious thing to me. As far as matchup, I think that Birmingham has a better defensive line. I think they have a better secondary. I do think the Battlehawks linebacking core is a lot better. Quarterback, it's a toss-up for me. A.J. McCarron's a better quarterback. Martinez is a better, athlete. Offensive line, you'd have to go spot to spot. I think the Battlehawks have a better receiving core. Tight end, you gotta give it to the Stallions. It's a toss up to me. I'm gonna get a lot of hate here. I go Birmingham in the regular season, but if they meet in championship, I think St. Louis pushes it out. I hope I'm wrong. I hope I'm wrong, but I can't even give you a score. Um, you know, I I don't think it's much of a home field advantage or anything like that, but I am very curious to see what that attendance is. Obviously, I don't know if you heard, but AJ McCarron, like he was an Alabama guy. Are we gonna get a couple butts in the seats because McCarron's coming back to Bama? Is that what we're gonna see? I don't know, but in the end, I am extremely curious to see, because in my opinion, this is the best team that St. Louis has played against, and are we going to be able to see the chip with the chips on the ground, or whatever you want, whatever tacky saying you want to call it? Are we going to be able to see St. Louis kind of live up to the hype, for lack of a better term? I mean, I'm extremely excited to see it. Very curious to see what they got going on the offensive line. Do they get Vidal Alexander back? Do they get Jawan Bushwell-BD back? It's crazy times. I mean, this I don't know, but I go Ham. I don't know what the score is. I could be wrong on, but I'm curious to see what the spread is as well. Game 3 of the week, starting off our Sunday in the best way. You got the Michigan Panthers versus DC Defenders. I'm going Michigan on this. Michigan's a way more complete team. DC, they're kind of willing their way. I know you could say the same thing about Michigan, but overall, I mean, Michigan's a more complete team. You continue to get Etling more reps. You continue to see what COC Mariner do. They got Samson Nakua now catching passes in the slot and whatnot. So I go Michigan. Worst case, Jake Bates will kick him the victory. It is at home for DC. Obviously everyone knows their record. They're like 10-1, but to me it's a Michigan. There's just not a lot of consistency there. I view Michigan, depending on the day, a better team than San Antonio. But I think this is chopped up for a good game as well. And the finish of the week, it's San Antonio versus Houston. I gotta go San Antonio on this. There is just nothing that Houston's doing that wows me outside of some decent plays here and there from Sinet. It's just there's too much turmoil in Houston for me to really buckle down and care about anything they do, unfortunately. And that may be rude to say, but that's the reality of the situation. So those are our picks this week. I got Arlington, Birmingham, Michigan, and San Antonio. Continues the competitiveness of the USFL and XFL conference. That would finish them out at 7-7. Like I said, guys, I am 14-10 this year. Feel pretty good about it. Mike Mitchell won't admit this, but he was 15-1 at one point. Called a couple good upsets. So we'll see what happens. And foosball fan is extremely right. The Roughnecks are rough to watch. So we'll see what happens on that front. Guys, if you're on Twitter and you want to head over to YouTube, drop a like and subscribe. Mean a lot to me. I mean, Gemini's calling an upset for Houston. I mean, it'd be something. It'd be entertaining for sure. I really hope St. Louis wins. I'm big into if you beat the team in the regular season, do you beat them in the playoff game? I mean, it's hard to beat a team 2 or 3 times. We talk about that a lot, but very curious, guys. Appreciate everyone watching. We kicked up to about 454 or 55 was our high water mark. So we'll see what happens. Gemini is calling for St. Louis versus Michigan. Okay, St. Louis versus Michigan, but we'll see what happens on that. And we did it last week, so we'll do it this week, just to peek into that last week of the season. Michigan versus Birmingham. All conference games. A lot. We could see some we could see it get a little goofy and whatnot. Like if Birmingham is 9-0, do they play Jamar? There's some backups. San Antonio, if St. Louis is 8-2, clinch the 1 seed, do they play their guys? DC and Arlington, they'd be out of it. Houston and Memphis. I mean, we could get back-to-back weeks, and ironically, like it would be at Protective for the conference championship game. It would be at the Dome for the Battlehawks, depending on what the playoff situation is. So just some things to think about. I don't know, but appreciate you guys riding with me through this. Like I said, if you're on Twitter, 464 of y'all, really appreciate you guys all tuning in. Drop a like, subscribe if you're on YouTube. It helps me out. Channel's been going through a weird thing just because I haven't been posting as much. So appreciate you guys checking in and have a great day, guys. Bye.